2. Hey, this is Curt Altarac with MusicMedic.com, and here we go with a live at 3:05. So what I'm going to talk about is setting up the left-hand table, and Ryan's running the camera, so if there's any questions, he's going to shout them out to me. Okay, let's talk about the left-hand table. The thing I hear a lot about the left-hand table on a saxophone is, I'll ask people, how do you set up the left-hand table? And what they'll tell me is, I kind of go back and forth. I make an adjustment here, and then I go back and I make an adjustment here, and I work back and forth until I have it. And I submit that anytime you have that sort of situation going on in your repairs, you're probably missing something. So it's a good time to ask a question or try to figure it out. So I had the same situation a while ago, and I decided to go ahead and figure it out and make a system. And the system that I have is really, I think, quite simple. It's easy to follow, and it makes it really clear for me the steps that I should take in just getting that left-hand table to work. The first thing about the left-hand table, I'll show you on this is a Chateau saxophone. The first thing about the left-hand table is that the motion of these keys, this is a modern table we're talking about, the motion of these keys is dependent on the height of your bell keys. If your bell keys are really high, these keys are going to move quite a bit. If your bell keys are really low, like this, then these keys are going to have very little motion. So hopefully that's somewhat obvious. So what that means is you may want to wait to set up your left-hand table until after you've played the horn. So when you set up the instrument, what I do is I wait to set up the left-hand table until the instrument is set up and playing. Then I set my left-hand table when I know my key heights of this, because that will change how I set up my left-hand table. So there's a lot going on here. It's one of the interesting things about what we do in repair. You know, we can talk about setting up the left-hand table, but it really involves almost everything that we do, and it's like that, right? Everything that we do, we sort of have to draw on all of our knowledge. So there's materials, there's key fitting, there's pivot screws, there's key heights, there's rolling around between the keys and how you can, and the ergonomics of this mechanism. But I'm not going to get into all that. I'm just going to get to the basic idea of getting this table to work without lost motion. So here is the system in a nutshell. Here's how I set up the left-hand table, and then I'll explain it. First, I make sure that my sliders are working. Then I set my B key, I set my B flat to my B key, I set the G sharp to the B key, and I set the C sharp to the G sharp. Let me say that again. I make sure my sliders are working. Then I set my B key height, and that's done by playing. I set my B flat key to my B key, then I set the G sharp key to the B key, then I set the C sharp to the G sharp. That means that the entire table is dependent on this one key. So let me kind of show you on an instrument that I've set up here, or have somewhat set up. This is one of Theo Wani's Mantra tenors, and we set these up here in the shop. So let me show you on this table here. Because of the key height, you'll see that the C sharp here is a little higher than the B, and we do that for feel. But we're not going to talk about feel right now. We're going to talk about how to set this up. So first I set up my sliders. You got to understand what the sliders are. There's a slider right here, and it adjusts the G sharp lever to the G sharp pad. And there's a slider down here, and it adjusts the C sharp lever to the C sharp pad. So the first thing I want to do is get my sliders parallel. Here's what that means. These are two of our flute dent rods. So let's pretend that one of these is the G sharp lever, and one of them is the lever, or the arm that's connected to the pad. And let's make this the slider. And if you've set up a saxophone, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you see this pivots here, I'm going to move this a certain amount, whatever that amount is. When I move this, I start here. I'm going to start right there on that line, and then I pivot it up to here. Of course, you can see the farther from the pivot I get, the greater the movement I have is. Okay. Now, when we have one arm here that's controlling another arm, if we put our slider, don't worry about that drawing. If we put our slider connected to this key here, this amount of rotation is going to equal a lot of movement. If we put it here, it's going to equal a little movement. So, let's put the slider all the way out here. Now this key, it pivots this way. This small amount of rotation, if we start here, let's start up here, and I'm going to move it down to this position. And let's start right here, and I'll move it down to this position. If I'm here, you see this key is closer, the slider is closer to this fulcrum. So a little bit of motion this way is going to equal a lot of rotation. That same amount of motion out here would be very little rotation. So if we put the slider here and this key is actuating this key, when I move this key, you see that, you see that this key moves a little. This key has a lot of linear motion but a little rotation, and it results in a lot of rotation on this key. If we put the slider here, then that same amount of rotation will result in very little movement of this key because it's farther from the pivot. What I want to do when I get started, if you don't understand that, you want to take some time and understand it. Sometimes I think about it with my arms. If my arms are here and this one pivots this way and this one pivots this way, if it connects here and I move this arm will move a lot. A little bit of rotation here because I'm far from the fulcrum will make a lot of rotation here because here I'm close to the fulcrum. And if I move it here, then a little bit of rotation here will make a lot of motion in this arm. If I put it in the middle, like this, they're both going to move the same. So, the first thing I want to do is I want to make these two mechanisms parallel. I want to make sure that these are basically parallel. So that when I slide this thing, all I'm doing is changing the relationship between these two keys. If I want my G-sharp lever to move less and result in more motion here, I slide it out here, and now my G-sharp lever moves and it makes more motion there. If I want the other way, I want my G-sharp lever to move less, or I want it to move more, but I want less motion here, I move over there, and then I can move more and get less motion there. If the two sliders are not parallel, say they're like this, which is a common situation. Now, when I come here, there's a key connected to this, and it has a G-sharp lever on it. This is always going to touch. But if I move the slider out here, this key is going to fall down here and the lever is going to move. That's not what I want. I want the lever to stay where it is because I want to set the lever and then I want to come back and adjust the motion of the pad. The same situation is what you have in the C sharp. When you look down here, you have a slider and you have the part that actuates it. All you want to do here, the only use for this slider is to set the height of this pad based on the movement of this key. But the movement of this key is already set. So the first thing we're going to do to set up the left-hand table, the first thing we do before we even start the job is make sure that our two sliders are parallel so that when you move that, or our two parts are parallel so that when you move that slider, you don't have to get into a situation where one is like this, you move the slider out here, this falls down, and the key up here moves out of the way. It's really simple if they're parallel because nothing is moving. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is get your sliders parallel so you have a system that you can work on. Then, the rest is so simple. This is your B-flat key. Maybe I have a B-flat key right here. Here's a B and a B-flat key from a Mark VI alto. You see that the B-flat touch, or the B touch, is soldered to the B pad. When you touch this lever, this pad is going to move the same no matter what. There's no way to adjust the relationship between this touch and that pad. There's absolutely no way. Unless you unsolder this and you start to change the length of these arms, basically changing the geometry of the key. And in that case, you don't need this video. So, You're not gonna do that. This is what it is, and this is what it is. And the movement of this B key is gonna be set by the height of this pad, and the height of this pad is gonna be set by how this instrument sounds when you play the note low C, because this is where the note low C comes out. So you push this button, and this pad closes. The amount it opens is set by the sound of low C. So you can adjust the motion of this lever. Okay, the B flat, let's see if I can remember how one of these goes together. The B flat, well, that was supposed to be a joke, but maybe I really can't. The B flat is directly connected to the B key. When you push the B key, when you push the B flat, it more or less directly connects to the B flat. You get a little bit of slide back here, but we're not going to worry about that. Basically, you push the B flat key and the B key moves, so these two, the B and the B flat, have to move the same exact amount because the B flat is also soldered to its touch. This touch is going to move and that pad's going to move the same no matter what. So the first step is to set the height of your B key. Your B key is the key that's going to set your entire left-hand table. You set the height of your B key based on the way the horn plays because the B key is soldered to the pad that it's connected to. And that key is going to move the same no matter what. Then you got your B key set, your B flat is simply set to it. And hopefully you know how to do that. There's a little arm back here and you can adjust that arm. These two keys are going to more or less move exactly the same. So there's not a lot of adjustment here. You're sort of stuck to how the horn plays, to how you're going to set this B key and B flat key. So these two are set. Now, the B key stops, and let me show you on this horn that I've set up. When the B key stops, the B pad hits down here, the B key stops. The G sharp key is going to travel about the same amount as the B key, but I leave a little bit of wiggle room in there. In fact, I leave the thickness of a gray ultra suede, but you can just leave a little bit of wiggle room. That wiggle room is going to really help your low B flat. When you play a low B flat, you don't want this G sharp key to stop that pad from hitting. And that has to do with the size of the pad and the surface area, the tone hole, and how your little pinky's pressure is distributed over these two really big tone holes. So you want to have the advantage to push down the low B flat and really kind of crush these pads closed. Because you're not just dealing with a static thing, there's pressure coming out of here and it's going to want to blow that open. So you want to make the G sharp key move a little bit more than the B flat key, because you don't want the G sharp to stop your B flat key from going down. You don't want them to hit at exactly the same time, stop your B flat key from going down, and then you can't add any pressure to your low B flat, because any pressure that, if that happened, any pressure you put in with your pinky would transfer directly to the foot of this G sharp, and you'd have a bad situation where you couldn't really crush these keys closed when you're playing a low B flat, which on saxophone is kind of the money note, and you want that to really speak well. So you got your B flat and your B flat and your B and your B flat set together. Now you make your G sharp key move a little bit more than the B key. Notice that we haven't talked about any other pads yet, just the B flat, and this G sharp lever. We're only worried about these levers right here. Now, your G sharp key has its motion set. So, when you have your G sharp key, the motion set, now you can set your C sharp motion to your G sharp motion, because the foot of the C sharp key, because when you push C sharp it opens a pad. See that C sharp lives in the down position, and when you push it, it opens it. So the upward position is not the foot. The downward position, the foot of the C sharp key, lives right here on the G sharp. It's that tab. That is the foot of the C sharp lever. So when you push it, the motion of this C sharp key is going to be limited by this G sharp key lever. So the foot is here, through the key, and right here. So in fact, the G sharp and the C sharp are going to move a little bit more than the B and the B flat, and that's okay. So we have Now we have this entire left-hand table set up, all the motion. I'm just gonna run through that one time. You get your sliding levers parallel. Then you come over here and you set your B key. When you have your B key set, you put your B flat on, or you set your B and your B flat to work together, and they're gonna move the same because their motion is only adjustable by tone. Then you set the G sharp to the B key, and you leave a little bit of crush room for the B flat so it'll play better. Then, using the G sharp key, which moves the same amount as the B key, plus your little crush, you set the motion of your C sharp. Now you have all of these set. Now maybe you run into a situation where when you push the G sharp key, now that you've set it, the G sharp key only opens a little bit. And if that's the case, if the G sharp only opens a little bit, you might want to make the motion of this key more. So maybe it's easier to see on this one because it's yellow. If you wanted the motion, if the pad was only opening not quite enough, and you wanted that to result in more motion in the pad, you already got your lever set. You can't adjust your lever motion anymore, and let's say you had your sliders parallel, then you would just take this slider right here and you would move it in this direction, in this direction, the phone, so that this lever allowed the pad to open up more. And now the pad would open up more and it would bottom out on this bumper right there. What I like to do is I like to have the G sharp bottom the pad out on the bumper, but remember that the B key moves a little bit less. So when you push the B key, you see it almost bottoms out on the bumper. It should almost bottom out on the bumper because it's a little bit less motion. Because you don't play with the B key very much to play G sharp, and no one's going to notice that. But you don't want a little bit of lost motion at the end of your G sharp lever. Okay, so you got your sliders parallel, you set your B and your B flat, now you got your G sharp, you set your C sharp, then you come down and you set your G sharp slider so that the pad opens fully when you press G sharp, it opens almost fully when you press B. Then you come down here and you have another slider here, and it's the same game. You check your height. If your height's okay, if it's hitting on the bumper, if you feel good about it, you play the C sharp, it sounds okay. You're kind of limited with this pad to what this pad is. And if it's not working, let's say it didn't open all the way. If it didn't open all the way, then we would want the pad to open up more. So what we would do is we would move the slider towards the pad so that the lever is here and the pad is here. The lever is going to move more farther from the fulcrum, so we would move the slider to where the lever is going to move more, and that would allow the pad to open up more. Okay, there's a lot more to this. There's spring tensions, there's all kinds of things about the left-hand table that are important to set up, but I think that's really important to get fundamentally. Here's the situation one more time. You get your sliders, you get the arms where your sliders live parallel to each other. Then you start on the left-hand table. You put your B and your B flat on, you set your B key. Your B key movement's going to set your whole table. Then you set your B flat to your B, then you set your G sharp to your B, plus a little bit, then you set your C sharp to your G sharp. And that is setting up the left-hand table. I'm doing this on 2 cameras, so maybe we want to end the one camera, Ryan, and we'll take some questions on Facebook.